Good afternoon, Woodfordia. To let you know that there are cameras that will be recording these sessions through YouTube and Woodford Folk Festival. It's being live streamed and recorded for people to view anytime worldwide. So we have a huge audience here in the background. Okay, Tenzing Shogul is Woodfordia royalty. He's a renowned Tibetan Australian artist, composer, activist, musical director, and cultural ambassador. Did I leave anything out? Oh, he's just a simple, good man. With a Tibetan nomadic lineage at the heart of his music, which he blends with contemporary sound. His music bridges Eastern and Western sounds. As a child, he listened to his mother's songs and attributes much of his passion to her. In 1997, he moved to Australia and has worked with all the greats, including Philip Glass, and has performed to packed audiences in Carnegie Hall, the Sydney Opera House, and Woodford Folk Festival. He has performed with Tibetan monks in exile, who he supports, along with a Tibetan children's villages, the School for Tibetan Refugee Children, which he attended as a child. There's the good man part. I'll let him open up the conversation in a minute about living and dying from the Buddhist perspective. Gordy, who is sitting on his right. Firstly, I need to say she has to leave early because she's got a set at the Amphi Grand immediately after this. So it's not that she's sick of talking to you. She has to go. So we'll give her a quick ovation as she leaves. She will also help us understand how the mind can help us live with more freedom and face death without fear. She's an award-winning artist with millions of streams, 2 acclaimed albums, multiple nominations to all sorts of top awards. She's toured extensively in Australia, the USA, and Europe. So we're very lucky to have her too. And what a conversation we're about to have. So please give a very, very warm welcome to Tenzing and Gordy.
You want to kick things off?
All right. Hi, Gordy.
Hi.
We just met at the backstage a
2
couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
So whatever we will be discussing, we'll be actually sharing our thoughts for the first time, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, so should...
Well, we thought maybe we would start off by telling the audience a little bit about ourselves. Yeah? Do you want to go first, or shall I?
Maybe you can.
Okay, sure. Well, yeah, I'm a performing artist and a songwriter. I perform under the name Gordy. My real name is Sophie, and I grew up in a tiny little town called Canoundra in New South Wales. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. Yep, nobody. Oh, yeah, one person. Are you my cousin? Maybe. And you know, I fell in love with music from a really early age. And as my career was kind of getting going, around 10 years ago, I was also studying medicine. And so I finished medical school as I was releasing my first album. And I think that, you know, gives me an interesting kind of perspective on the sort of things that we might talk about today. Because, you know, living and dying joyously is, yeah, something that I think about and I see in hospitals and I witness in experiencing music and writing music. And yeah, it's a concept that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, especially over the last few years, which I'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of the bullet points for me.
Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. And I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we have been sitting on, dancing on, listening to music, and also the formless beings that might be coming around and tap on your shoulder while you're listening to Gauri and me yak away. I'm Tenzin, and I was born in Tibet. There's many Tenzins around the globe, living as a refugee, scattered around the globe. And my parents fled because of the cultural revolution in Tibet. And my father was a very amazing shaman, medicine man. So, but I don't remember his face because he was a healer, and lot of many sick beings would come to him during the day. So in the evenings when he wind down, he would play the flute and drink a very beautiful millet, fermented millet, to wind down, as you do in Australia, like you take a beer or a wine or something like that. My father was doing that after a day's job of healing people. But his healing was where he has to go into trance. So maybe that's why I was scared of looking at his face during the trance time. So I don't remember his face. But I remember his flute playing. So one of the influence of my musical lineage is from that. And then my mother, who followed me into India when I was put into an orphanage to live with 3,000 other kids. And my early influence was from my mother. Because as a traditional mother, as a traditional nomadic lineage holder, she would rise up early in the morning, at 4 in the morning, and start murmuring her chant. So as a toddler, as I'm in my being in the dream state, and slowly awakening to it, would hear the sound of my mother chanting. So those two were the early influence for my attachment to music. And then both of them passed away without me being able to do the death ceremony. In Tibetan tradition, there is the death ceremony. So that has been a huge part of my artistic practice. So I think that's where and I'm super joyously remembering them, one without face, one with face, who looked after 100 other kids. My mother, who looked after 100 other kids. So yeah, so we'll dig more into that later on.
That's great. It's interesting to me to hear you talk about your father and, being a healer all day, and then the thing that he did to do what, I guess, was to play the flute at night. Do you think why do you think he chose to play the flute at the end of each day?
I guess music has that healing aspect, I guess. I don't know. But the music has amazing healing aspect. For me, I would say, if I was not born into a Buddhist family, then I would have taken music as my religion. But I'm born into the family, so I didn't choose. But it's a very beautiful philosophy. For me, now, when I look back into it, the spiritual practice has become my musical practice as well. I don't have two separate practice. And so a lot of I think a lot of the time, I think we think, I think dying is kind of like a, the other week I was kind of thinking, dying is a strange business. You know, it's kind of a strange business. It leaves you with so many unanswered questions. And through music, I've been able to heal the ones that needs to be healed. Does that make sense? Yeah. And Gauri, why are you in this? I got no idea about Gauri, and she doesn't have any idea about me. So we are meeting here on the first time. So I don't know what to ask you, but you seem like you have got a very beautiful smile, and with that I know that you have a very beautiful heart. So, what is that interests you in, like, digging deep into? I know you said, you know, the practice of in the hospitals has that as well, but there must have been something that is music, like, has your music also taken shape because of what you've been facing?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has. I think, you know, I found the pandemic a really interesting time because there was so much conversation around what is essential to survival. You know, people who are allowed to go out of lockdown and go to their everyday jobs because their work was essential to survival, and my work in the hospital was, but my work in music wasn't, you know. So it kind of made me think a lot about survival and living. And I think that, you know, while medicine and healthcare was deemed essential to our survival, life isn't just about surviving. You know, life is about living, and music for me and for millions of people is essential to living. You know, music was a part of my life as soon as I could speak. I think I did a rendition of Who Will Buy at 2 years old. I don't know if you're a musical fan. Maybe not. But yeah, you know, it's always kind of been in my DNA, and I feel it truly feels like a gift from another place. Songwriting to me becomes more and more mysterious the more I try to do it. I think when it, you know, first started to happen, I was 13 years old, and I kind of didn't question it. It was just felt like this language that I knew how to speak. But the older I get, the more conscious I become of its mystery, and where it comes from, where inspiration comes from, and you know, those things give me a lot of joy. I have this memory of being maybe 14 years old, and I went to do some community service in a dementia ward, and the patients there had very advanced disease, and you know, my grandfather died from the same illness, and I, you know, was very confronted by the patients. A lot of them were sort of unable to speak, unable to kind of interact. And then the people I was with, there was a piano there, and we started playing You Are My Sunshine. And everybody in the room, all the patients, started singing all the words. And, you know, it's a remarkable phenomenon, music. I think it reaches parts of our brain that we don't really understand. And for me, it's, you know, it's been a real well of joy, and it helps me understand things about living. But, you know, I guess it helped me understand dying as well, which is also what we're here to talk about. And in 2018, I was kind of, you know, finishing medical school, and my grandmother passed away, and she and I were extremely close. She helped raise me, and I was at her bedside when she passed, which was a real privilege. And shortly after that, I went into doing my final medical school term, and I was doing a geriatrics term, so caring for elderly people. And one of the things that you learn as a medical student when you're doing the geriatrics term is you learn how to certify death. So you perform an examination when someone has passed away, and it's, listening to their chest for absence of breath sounds and heart sounds, and checking for any signs of life. And it goes over this few minutes period, and it is, as you can imagine, a relatively confronting thing to do, but it really was. You feel the enormity of the privilege to be here with someone just after they've left this earth. And as I was kind of, performing these examinations, I had this strange memory flood my mind, which was sitting as a child at my kitchen table playing with Play-Doh. It's the kind of plasticine substance, and I think because of the changes in the human body that happen quite close after death, I was thinking about playing with Play-Doh and putting it into different shapes, and then going to bed and coming out the next morning, and it sort of would have this waxy appearance on top, and it was like the shape had sort of set after I'd left it for a period of time. And I thought about that idea for a long time, for many years, and I wrote a lot of music about it. And I was fixated on these two words, like plasticine, and I thought, if we are like plasticine in death, in our final moments, how might we be like plasticine in life? Plasticine is a malleable, unbreakable substance. You can put it into all sorts of different shapes, and it comes in all myriad of colours, and it gave me a lot of comfort, and it became this kind of theme for me to think about all the phases of life that I've been in, that people I know have been in, and that it's maybe we form all these different shapes, and at the end we're kind of blessed with this idea that we settle in our final form, and yeah, I've found that really a comforting way to think about life and to think about death. Yeah. You were talking before about the kind of rituals around death. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, that was a beautiful story that you shared. I'll have to go listen. Is that a song, like Plasticine?
It's the title of my record, of my album.
Please note that down.
Yeah. That wasn't a pitch, I promise.
We just met anyway, so I want to go and listen to it.
Sure.
Anyway, for me, the death, living and dying are basically same. As death is, as a spiritual practice, death is there every moment. The death of a thought, death of an action, death of a breathing, the breath that I just took, and then so there's constantly dying thing happening constantly, or living, like it's just in cycle. But when the big physical death comes about, it's a little bit different. You are challenged with it, and you see it and face it in a bigger way. And for me, the biggest one was not being able to do the ritual that I was, as a Buddhist practitioner, as a good son, to do the rituals when your father and mother passes away is a 49 day of ritual, where you read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead guides you through the whole process of how the last leaving of now the sign of earth is dissolving into water, water into fire, fire into air, air into consciousness. So last, when the air leaves the body, like all the sign of earth, the earth, water, and all this, and the final dissolving is the breath. And as that leaves, then the consciousness leaves the body. And so during that time, you do, for a Buddhist practitioner or a Tibetan practitioner, a family would do a 49-day of ritual where you go through each day and how the consciousness travels. And longest duration a consciousness would take is 49 days. And the consciousness might be reborn in, like as you pass away, be born in another second. So there is that. And as I came to Australia, I had this kind of, not repent, but not being able to do that, perform those rituals. So I asked one of my teachers, what should I do? Because it keeps coming back in my head about my mother and father, and So there's my teacher Namkhen Nubu Rinpoche. He also passed away. He was a very amazing guru, teacher. He said, visualize your father and mother right in front of you, and then read the Tibetan Book of the Dead as you visualize them. And they might be already reborn somewhere, in some world somewhere. But it will still help because of your thought energy. Does that make sense? So I was able to, as I was doing that, reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead in Australia after many years, it was kind of like the book was very hard to read. So I took out my instrument and started reading the text with the instrument, playing music to it. And it was more like put the English translation and the Tibetan translation together. And that's how, if you have, probably I put out an album called Songs from the Pardo. Pardo meaning in-between state, being in-between state. And it's a 90-minute piece, like almost about 90-minute long piece. And probably if you do get time, I do encourage you to. It's a little collaboration with Laurie Anderson. She is narrating the whole Songs from the Pardo, and then I'm doing all the music for it. And it was my way of giving my gratitude to my parents. At the same time, it's a gift for all the friends who hopefully will encounter it and be of help for them. Because it did help me to go through the whole. Now I'm really happy that I actually did that. And I'm sure my mom and dad probably are running around somewhere, maybe dancing somewhere here in Woodford as well. Anyway, that was, so for me, living and dying is same thing. There is no difference, because it's happening, evolving. And it's also my own practice. Now in my own artwork, like my musical practice, so I put that in there as well. And I think as an artist, I think we are so, I think, we do like mapping our emotions through sound. So how do you do that? Like when you map your emotions through the sound um, and while you're writing, you know, like, because I think we do map.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do, yeah. I find, I guess, first of all, I've had an interesting relationship with creativity and songwriting, and it's fascinating to me how it evolves over the course of life and years. And when I first started writing songs, it felt like a tap that I couldn't turn off, and it was immensely inconvenient. Like I'd be trying to do my studies, and a song would be coming, and it was a great way to procrastinate from things that I had to do. But it was also just a pleasure, it was something that happened all the time. And then I found, when I was working a lot in the hospital over the course of the pandemic, I felt like the tap had turned off, and that really worried me. And I wondered if it would kind of come back. But when I kind of carved out a couple of weeks to go and see what I could excavate, and I think to continue the water metaphor, it had sort of formed an underground spring that I could tap into. And to speak to your point about mapping your emotions, when I was writing those songs, I was in this really beautiful space called Phoenix Central Park in the middle of Sydney. It's like this gorgeous kind of timber-panelled room. It has sort of a slow staircase spiralling around the outside and a grand piano in the middle. And I went in there for a couple of weeks, and I sort of enclosed myself in a circle of instruments, amplifiers and guitars and synthesizers. And each morning I would go in and sort of sit for 5, 10, 15 minutes and try to really tap into the emotion that I had that morning for whatever reason, and really let that guide me. And then I would, press record on something, and I would make a loop on the piano, and then I would, play that, and then make a little loop on a drum or on a bass or something, and kind of let these layers come. And it felt to me like pulling out puzzle pieces, but I didn't know sort of what the final image was, or all I had was the feeling. I didn't sort of think this is what I'm writing a song about right now, but the music kind of helped me understand and sort of pave a way to a song just by trying to be in touch, with those emotions. And I think that's such a, it's a pretty special thing about being allowed to be an artist, is that, we spend our lives really tapping into emotion. I love the famous Australian writer Helen Garner, and she once was talking about creativity and said, it's the job of writers and artists to walk around like an exposed nerve ending, which can be very unpleasant sometimes, but it's it's a pretty amazing way to be as well. And I think being allowed to sort of study those emotions, it leads, well, to go back to one of the reasons we're here, it leads back to joy. Because I think to have the time to understand those things, is a real privilege. I was listening to you before talk about getting out your instrument to sort of, interpret some of those rituals, and I find that really interesting in how, what gaps music fills in some of our understanding of, of living and death. Do you feel the influence of the way you describe life and death sort of side by side constantly? I guess one thing I'm interested in is how that sort of filters into your music. And the other thing I'm interested in is how how that affects your experience of grief when you lose someone, if you're sort of so cognizant of death being side by side with life. Does that make grief easier to experience?
I think that reminded me, that last statement reminded me of a great teacher, one of my great teachers. He would say, don't be sad, feel the sadness. So if you be sad, your whole body becomes sad. Whole immunity goes away. And your physical being definitely sad. Mental being already sad because you are becoming sad. At the same time, your physical being also becomes sad. And then your immune system goes down as well. So if you feel the sadness, there's difference between becoming sad and feeling sad. You can feel sad with gratitude. You can feel sad with love. You can feel sad with compassion. You can feel sad with all these emotions that, that's paying gratitude to the being who has just passed away, or whatever feeling, a dog that has passed away that you love so much, or a cat, or anything, but don't be sad. So that you reminded me of that statement from my teacher. And then when you were talking about dementia before, I had this experience with one of my dear friend who is 88. And at around the evening, around 8 o'clock, he would start forgetting who he is, about 5 minutes. And I spent a month with him. And around that time, he would forget. And that was a very beautiful moment for me as an observer. But I don't know what he was going through in his world for that 5 minutes when he was forgetting who he was. But for me, all this whole of his life he was this great, amazing person. Everyone loved him, and he, these avatars that we have built upon ourselves, like this person and that person, imputed upon ourselves, the manifestations of yourself in different stages of life. You are so attached to them, and that has built so many egos that becomes a blockage to yourself as well. So at this 5 minutes, he forgot who he is, and that's when I thought that was so nice for me. For that 5 minutes, for me, he was a being who doesn't know who he is, a beautiful being that, all that imputed thing on himself is gone during that 5 minutes. But then I was also feeling sad if that forgetfulness will start to prolong. Then that was also making me feel sad for him. So anyway, there was this whole thing going on about the dementia. And so I wrote a piece called "Who Am I?" with a puzzled smile. He was asking me who he is, and he had a very nice grin on his face when he was asking. So I was kind of saying, "Who am I?" with a puzzled smile. Am I a plumber, a taxi driver, a father, a mother, a queen, a queer, a king? All these labels that you have imputed.